Welcome, everybody. I'm delighted to be talking to our panel of experts in the field of AI and design. Before I introduce them, just let me set the scene real quickly. So I think when a lot of people hear the words AI and design, one of the first things they tend to think of are these tools like GPT-3, Midjourney, and DALL-E, these huge foundational models that can do things that we could be considered creative. I just want to emphasize that's not what we're going to be focusing on in this panel. I think those things are fantastic, I guess, gateway drugs to get people interested in the field and see the potential of it. And then once they're hooked on it and actually want to work in it and maybe develop their skill set in that direction, that's the kind of thing that I want to hear about from this panel here. And I hope that these accessible tools are encouraging of people, but then they look further and they stumble upon this podcast and are curious about how they can become researchers and designers in AI like our panelists here. So to my immediate left is Dr. Alessandro Bozon. He's a professor of human-centered design with the Knowledge and Intelligence Design Lab. I think he brings the most holistic perspective on designing and developing of human in the loop AI systems. And to his left is Dr. Maria Luce Lupetti. She's an assistant professor, sorry, in the design department as well. And I think of her work as she uses her design background to create artifacts, experiences, and scenarios that really provoke and probe at how we should be more thoughtful and more examined as we deploy these powerful systems. And on the other side of the table is soon to be Dr. Kars Elfrink. He's a PhD researcher looking at AI from a contestable perspective. From what I understand, that is a step beyond transparency, where you're simply providing an explanation on what the AI is doing, but offer means for the public and the users to then give feedback back to the system and change it and improve it somehow. Also, he brings in over 15 years of experience as a design consultant and entrepreneur in this field, and seems to have a track record in developing technology systems that empower the people. So I think we have some very relevant experiences here to get us on this conversation. And I want to start by probing why this union of AI and design. Is it a match made in heaven, or is it just a grudging thing that we're pushing the two together? So I want to start by asking Alessandro, picking back off of an earlier conversation we've had. You mentioned to me that designers actually have a responsibility as potential custodians for good AI development. Could you elaborate a bit why you believe that we are responsible? And am I projecting in saying that great power comes with great responsibility, and it's some power that we designers have that has bestowed upon us this duty to make sure it goes well?
Well, I think it's a necessity to get let's say designers engaged in thinking about future AI systems. Digital technology in general, AI specifically, are technologies that have had and are having an incredible impact on society and individual communities, societies alike. And right now, we are somehow injecting this technology in the real world. We are becoming very good at engineering them, but we are observing that sometimes, actually quite several times, there is something wrong about them. They simply do not interface well with how people want to be or would like to be. They don't interface well with how we would like these societies we live in to be, and they might cause some effects that are undesirable or even negative. And we have a categories of professionals and researcher that is really concerned about creating product service systems that are desirable, they are useful, and they're exactly as we want them to be. And those are designers. I think the designers should play a more important role in how do we think about the future of ourselves, our technology, AI again. But the power you were talking about is one that I wish they would have. But right now, we're not there yet. And that's one of the reasons why we are we are created and we are promoting this Design AI program to push forward from an educational perspective, but also from a knowledge creation, from a research perspective, what needs to be known by designers, what they need to be able to contend with. How is this AI design material, something to play with? That's what we are doing here, and well, we will do in the future, hopefully.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think in my mind, Maria and Kars are practitioners who answered that call to help design more responsible AI. Could you two elaborate a bit about what skill set you kind of enable you to jump into this field, and maybe what skill sets you had to kind of pick up along the way? And also kind of why did you choose to answer this call?
Yeah. Shall I start?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting question for me, because I think compared to other designers working with and on AI and for AI, I don't have technical expertise. So I bring a very designerly background. I studied industrial design, and I'm trying to see what my expertise as a designer, my capacity of giving shape to things and thoughts can help, if that can help in developing better AI systems, in reflecting on the impact of AI systems in society, what Alessandro was saying. But at the same time, in the moment in which you start playing around and understanding and learning how to handle AI tools, you open up much more opportunities. So I think what Alessandro was explaining, we need to also train ourselves and our students to combine both worlds. So we are really in a transition there, I think.
So the skill sets that allowed me to kind of jump into it, and those that I had to kind of pick up along the way, right? So I guess on the one hand, yeah, like you said, I mean, I come from practice, and I now that I'm kind of doing, I guess, embedded research in local government around how they use AI for decision making, I can kind of fall back on the typical designer skill set of being able to kind of work with people from many different backgrounds and fields, and try to kind of figure out a solution together, right, and facilitate that process. That's something that I can still use and I benefit from. I also dabbled in I guess activism in the industry, and trying to kind of build a community of tech people who want to kind of steer technology development towards kind of social justice purposes. So that kind of motivated me to kind of get into this. But certainly, I mean, I have no background in political science or whatever, so I had this kind of naive understanding of how that sort of stuff works. So it's been really kind of a journey of kind of understanding that domain more properly as I go about kind of suggesting ways of making these systems more democratic. So that's the main thing that I'm still learning to kind of combine with traditional design.
I see. One of the most common questions I get from my master's students is, do I need to learn programming in order to do some project in AI and design? And I naturally push them too. But I'd love to hear from you. What do you think that is the kind of coding ability, and maybe data literacy, just being able to understand data? Is that a crucial part of being able to work in this industry? Or can you get away with not? Anybody, please.
Well, that's the same question I typically have as the second one in my courses, right? Do we need to program? I think it's, to some extent, it's inevitable, right? My image of designers are of professionals that really contend with the materials they have to design with, and they develop an understanding of what they can do with it by playing with it. We don't get surprised too much, if you have to, I don't know, play around with plastic or with wood or whatever. But for this, there is definitely a knowledge gap to be filled. Now, I am not necessarily convinced that designers have to master the art or craft of programming, as you would expect a programmer or computer scientist to. I think we ought to provide them also tools, ways to experiment and to play around, that allows them to get more directly confronted with it. I think we've been doing a very good job when we were, for instance, thinking about what tools like processing, right? That really enabled a new generation of designers that could play with visualizations and interaction in a completely different way. So I imagine it's something like that. So yes, some programming, but not what, and some data literacy, that's for sure. And I can elaborate on why I think that's important, but not necessarily at the same level as we'd expect the computer science students to.
And you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we've been using the material metaphor now for in several of our answers, and I guess that goes back to the notion of in industrial product design, that you have some familiarity with the materials, literally the materials that the product you're designing will be constructed from, right? Without necessarily being a master craftsman, I don't know, woodworker or whatever, but you kind of understand the basics so that you know what it can and cannot do. And similarly, I think the analogy goes quite well for software and data and now with models. It's a bit of an odd question to me. I studied interaction design around the around the turn of the millennium, and we were kind of in an art school, but playing around with all kinds of software tools, precursors of processing in a very early interaction design program. And I don't know, it just seems natural to me that if you want to do stuff with computers, that you have some basic grasp of what they can and cannot do. And this kind of fear or perhaps not fear, but insecurity about kind of diving in and playing around with that stuff is I think, leads to designers being easily kind of manipulated into thinking in particular directions where they might think otherwise if they have a little bit more confidence about the stuff that they are working on.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting thing that you were saying, because personally, I think you can really get away without learning how to code. I'm really convinced, especially if we are thinking about the designers that will go into the design market. So working in agencies or industry, because basically we are discussing now the role of a designer as a one thing, but there are very different roles in the design field. And if you are a UI, UX designer, maybe you don't need to learn how to code for having a job in the field. But what Kars was saying is interesting, that you can be redirected. So for me, it's really, the point is that once you have that basic literacy, you can develop a more critical thinking about it, and you can be more conscious of what you are contributing to. Also, because we have all the discussions about dark patterns in UX design. I mean, with AI, it's just amplified everything. So if you don't understand what is the implication of employing a certain algorithm, and I'm telling from the perspective of somebody that has a limited understanding of that, but still.
But also the implications of, requiring some particular data.
Exactly.
From the users of your service or in general, right? So there are a lot of subtleties that I think designers should contend with. That require some literacy, right? So it's
Interesting. Yes, when I was brainstorming for this podcast, I couldn't stop thinking about this. I don't know if this reference will hit, but this Bruce Willis movie from the 90s called Deep Impact, where there was an asteroid coming to hit the Earth, and they took miners and trained them to be astronauts to go solve this problem. When I'm thinking, wouldn't it be easier to train astronauts with mining skills as opposed to miners to learn to be astronauts? And do we face a similar issue here? Is it better to start from the computer science side or start from the design side? Or should we just make a whole new discipline altogether? And maybe that's where y'all are doing in the academic side. And also maybe if Kars can comment a bit about why you chose to leave industry and pursue this topic in academia. Are there trade-offs and opportunities on both?
Yeah, perhaps something I bumped my head and, woke up one morning and was like, I need to go to university to figure this out. To your last question, honestly, I started from this curiosity about the implications of AI for the design field, and from there I started kind of thinking about, okay, what would be a good platform for me to kind of explore this, and I considered various options, and more or less by a process of elimination arrived at, well, I guess I have no choice. I need to do a PhD now. So that's the answer to that question.
Could you elaborate a bit more about the kind of the weights and the reasons why you?
Okay,
kinda
well, I
question?
mean, obviously, many of the other options were somehow, in practice or in industry at various scales or various types of organizations, or perhaps in government.
Mhm.
And we're talking some time ago now, so the field was a little bit different. And I just felt like academia would give me the maximum amount of independence to kind of attack this problem from the angle that I would think would be most fruitful. Whereas in most other situations, I would be more beholden to organizational priorities. So that was the main reason for me to do this PhD, and it played out quite nicely. I'm not complaining.
Will you return to industry after?
Who knows?
Okay, okay. And maybe hear from the two of you about, and Maria especially, having been on both sides of this equation now as a design student and now as a design educator. Do you feel like what is missing in design education to produce the next generation of AI designers, let's call them?
That's a very difficult question. Well, I think in general, for me in design education, what I miss sometimes is the connection between what is the role of the designer in the market and what is being taught in the university. And I think sometimes we train future designers around ideals, while the reality is much different. But at the same time, I think we need to do that to some extent. Otherwise, you cannot talk about critical thinking, values, and all sorts of things. Because if you just stick to what is happening, what gets to the market of design jobs, all of that doesn't happen. Doesn't have a space very often. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I think we're all trying to figure
Yeah.
out that question.
Yes.
As we go.
And
Yeah, I mean, to your first question, I think that there is a mindset, a tradition that every discipline carry with them, and I mean, ultimately we would like every discipline to be cross-contaminated by each other. So, in the same way that right now we have, I don't know, computational social scientists, for instance, right? I mean, the crossbreeding on two disciplines that somehow bring on the one hand what is needed to execute them, on the other hand the sort of background I was talking about. Maybe we will have a new generation of AI designers, as you say. Right now, I think what is more urgent is for design professional to enter the arena, to enter to be part of the narrative, and with the idea that we are not trying to train hardcore coders. I think it will be more effective, considering also the urgency to take this from a design perspective, without forgetting that some of the topics that are important and of relevance are also already taught in computer science faculties. But then again, the origin from where the students and the educator come from is different. And so it shouldn't be an either or right now. But I think the most urgent step and the most effective step we can take right now, given the urgency, is to educate designers.
I see. If not, of course, not either or. Would you say the field of, we often like to call ourselves human-computer interaction researchers. So would that be a fair title for this overlap, or do you think it's missing some?
Well, human-computer interaction as a broader field, of course, it's broad enough to encompass many of the skills and topics that are researched. So in that respect, it could be a good container. And I'm a strong proponent of a new wave of human-computer interaction research that goes back and look at this AI technology. This is happening, by the way, yeah? But I think we should double down or triple down on that, because that's really what we need. But I see ACI as a let's say as a place for intersections, where different disciplines somehow come together and learn from each other and put their respective knowledge at best use. At the same time, there are some skills that are probably purely designerly. It might not necessarily be specifically their place might not be in human-computer interaction. So I think it's the combination with these two fields, where of course ACI is definitely having a little bit of design in that, but design is more than human-computer interaction. And I think we also need that design part
I see. I see.
from a methodological perspective, for instance.
Very interesting. Maybe so. Aside from the practicals of what you need to have, the skill set wise or philosophy wise, to become a practitioner in this field, maybe can I ask you a bit about your personal experiences in practicing in this field? Could you tell me what in your mind is good AI design practice, or one's a working metaphor that you're still kind of putting together, and one that might be helpful for future practitioners here who might be coming up with the next Cambridge Analytica unintentionally?
Well, we
Anybody, please. This is just an open question to.
Well, look, my personal so my chair is called Human-Centered AI. So in this respect, I advocate for a more human-centered and planetary-centered approach to how this AI is designed. Right now, we're basically engineering AI systems. We're not really designing them, and the difference is we're not starting from exactly what is needed and what is appropriate and what is actually going to answer the needs that we have, but we're starting from the technological possibilities. And I think this is the change in perspective that we need. So if I have to imagine an ideal way to go about designing AI fueled systems, whatever they are, right? It can be a smart thermostat to, I don't know, the next generation of very addictive social media. You should have a more, multi perspective, a more comprehensive understanding of who are we designing for and what is exactly the effect that we are going to create. So yeah, I mean, I would call it human-centered AI, but probably is also maybe too limiting as a definition. But yeah.
Limiting, in my understanding, in terms of like, because the whole society is involved, not just individual humans, right? Or is
Well,
in what
yeah,
area?
because it's I guess, I mean, maybe human-centric evokes the individual, and yeah, I guess traditionally much of design has been about creating things for individuals. Now, of course, we recognize that whenever we put something in the world, it doesn't affect an individual person. It affects also, group of people, be in small community or society. When it comes from AI to AI, I think, and digital technology, we are somehow trapped into this, idea of ethereal, technology that doesn't really exist in the real world, right? It's the cloud, right? But actually, it's raw materials and electricity and data farms that suck up water. So that angle is also very important to keep into account. And right now we're not nearly doing anything enough about that, not even in the discourse. So when I'm saying it's limiting, it's because it's not only about the relationship, the individual one between a person and a piece of technology, but it's about the relationship between the technology and society and the planet.
I see. Oh, the whole ecosystem, from the
Yes.
infrastructure to the interaction to the
Indeed.
everything. I see. Anything to
Yeah,
add?
for me, I connect to that, but not to be a good AI designer, but to be a good designer. And then we'll see if it goes to AI. We should start from the possibility of not designing AI and really question that. And for me, very often there is no sufficient justification. And I think also that's why I'm not sure what would be the merge between design and AI, because maybe I'm not interested in becoming a new figure. I'm okay with being with fitting more with the traditional figure of a designer, because that is really broad already. So maybe we can expand in methods and yeah, we need to rethink ourselves, but still I think, for me, it's really important to question the very assumption that we need AI, that we need technology in any case.
I think that's a fantastic point. Not to be a good AI designer, but to just be a good designer, because the same principles on how to make these things work for people still is the same.
Geez, I don't know. I mean, the question is so broad, right? And I mean, if I remember correctly, like, what does good AI design
Yes.
practice look like?
Well, I guess specifically to you, do you have a kind of guiding metaphor or a mantra or a way of thinking about working with AI maybe as a material?
Geez, I
Yeah.
mean, the main
Yeah.
thing that I'm really interested in, that I got interested in, that got me into this is this idea of, you know, conflict, disagreement, dissensus, and how that contrasts with, you know, typical design doctrine, which is often in favor of kind of getting to a consensus or an agreement as soon as possible. So I got really kind of infatuated with the idea of designing for disagreement and that sort of thing. And in the meantime, I mean, if we, you know, step outside this building and read the newspaper, then you know, there's more than enough disagreement to go around. So the pendulum has swung back a bit for me, and I'm like, oh, maybe designing for disagreement is a little bit of a bad idea. I'm getting to an answer to your question, by the way, but a little bit of a detour. But I still think but now I think perhaps the source of this disagreement that we dislike is still this emphasis on, you know, getting to agreement at all costs. And this links up to what I think is important for designers in, you know, working on AI systems that have any sort of social impact. Is that I think we are in a position to ask difficult questions and to kind of push back on this imperative of efficiency at all cost, and work to at least have whatever process is constitutive of an AI system to be as kind of pluralistic and inclusive as is possible. So I think that's the main thing for me at the moment with AI design, and I don't see enough of that at the moment. It's a field that is dominated by very myopic views, and I think that's a real, I mean, that's a problem, but it's dangerous. It's kind of actively harmful, as Alessandro pointed out as well.
Allow me to play a devil's advocate on that. Do we really want pluralism and inclusivity in all cases? I think back to the Microsoft Tay, where they built a system, launched it, and allowed humans to interact with it. And through that interaction, actually really messed up the performance of the system. So is it always good to have as many variety of humans as possible into your system, or is it worth designing some people out of it?
Well, in that case, are we arguing that that was really inclusive and representative?
Oh, like suppose we're not
Yeah.
talking, the system itself might have been a poorly designed one. But I guess my
But the
question
data set used, yeah.
yeah, my question is about like, how do you decide what stakeholders to include on AI, and should it be everybody? And if so, I guess, yeah, like I can imagine so many opportunities for abuse and negative feedback loops, right? So how do you kind of think about that, right? Systems that you set loose and they can do things you can't predict.
Well, probably starting from recognizing the true essence of human nature, right? Which I think it's somehow something that wasn't considered in that specific case, for the good and for the bad, right? We as humans, we should be able to participate, whether we know it or not, but in you know, giving shape to these societally changing type of systems. Something that I think it's not always fully appreciated is that when it comes to this particular type of technology, the data that is used, or which data to use, is designed by somebody, but the data itself is produced by us, all of us, right, for the good and for the bad. The myopic view that Kars was mentioning before, which was you mentioned to be driven by profit or effectiveness. I think I'm not really sure efficiency.
Yeah, efficiency.
Efficiency,
I
right?
didn't use the profit term.
Yeah. Okay.
you know me well enough.
Efficiency. I think as a byproduct of ignoring the negative sides of efficiency when it comes to properly weighting the contribution of everyone in this particular case of the data. So just to give you a very concrete example, I cannot imagine a more inclusive system when it comes to the way that we use our language, English language as produced on the web, than these foundational language models like GPT-3 and the like, because those are trained on the biggest corpus of humanly produced text that exist. Okay, English spoken on the web, fair enough. But because of that, we shouldn't be surprised if something goes wrong if we use them, because hey, people are not all good and well-meaning, and whatever well-meaning means for different people. So the in principle, yes, we should be as inclusive as we can. In practice, I think only through a true understanding of what does it mean for people to be part of these complex socio-technical systems, we can create technology that is for good, ultimately, and beneficial for people.
I see. Anything?
Overall, I agree, and I think maybe we need to make the effort of trying to imagine what might be these misuses and abuses of systems and try to prevent them when it's possible. But at the same time, I have another question. I mean, in all democratic processes, right, the assumption is that you give access, you give voice and the possibility of choice to everybody in principles. But it's the same thing for when you go voting, right? You don't want some people to vote, but you cannot prevent them to vote, and you have to live with it, and it's going to happen soon. So in our country. So so what can we do for that? I'm not sure. We can educate. We can put strategies. We can create strategies to
check and balances.
Yeah. But we cannot really say that some voices cannot be included, I think.
I see. I think that's a very...
I think you should disagree here, Carsten. You should just, no, I disagree. No, you...
We can get political.
I'm biting my tongue.
Well, if I can add one final thing, the problem is not if we should include people, all people. The problem is how do we do that? Because that's what we miss.
Yes.
I mean, we have that problem.
Yes.
Like we talk about being open, inclusive, and co-designing.
Yes.
But then we always involve the same people. And we talk with the same people. We have the same personas in mind. And we just perpetuate a certain view of society and technology.
I really like that point. I think, yes, there are fundamental problems that could, like even democracy itself, the problems that we see with democracy now, it could be a system issue or a design issue rather than some fundamental flaw of the philosophy, right? I see. So other than misuse and abuse of these powerful systems, are there other things that kind of worry you, or what would be the most concerning issue while practicing in this field?
I don't know. I mean, the conversation is taking a gloomy turn, I think. But I think a big question that I keep coming back to that I find really interesting is, with artificial intelligence, what kind of intelligence are we thinking about, or what kind of idea do we have in our head when we say intelligence, and what types of intelligence are currently kind of let's say, fashionable or en vogue, and which ones are we missing? So, yeah, I think that's interesting to me to explore again from and this is the kind of way of looking at things that is, I hope also inspiring for designers, because you can kind of take a step back and understand that this technology can be shaped, right, in various ways towards specific ways of mediating our experience of the world or being with us in the world. It doesn't have to be one thing. So that to me is really, really fascinating.
I see. We can stop the gloomy bits.
Well, I'm all for it if you want, but maybe it's too much.
Yes, let's not. Let me ask the opposite. What is the most exciting thing that's on your mind these days from what you're working on? Maybe a kind of an opportunity for others that you want to say, hey, this is really interesting. Come work over here.
Yeah, for me, there is all this new sort of creative ins that you get when working with these new tools that we mentioned at the beginning, but also I work a lot with robots, and there is this perception of animacy, of intention in the machines that is so generative, and you project a whole world around little things, little behavior, and even if the real intelligence of that thing is very limited, you can create rich interaction, rich stories around things, and that's beautiful and really exciting to work around.
I don't know. I don't know. I hope many of you are old enough to remember, this very nice 80 TV series, like Supercar or Million Dollar Man or whatever. I always love the idea of humans enhanced with technology. I think technology, we humans as a species, we are tool producers, right? That's what set us apart from other species on this planet, and that's a new tool. That's a tool that can give us, can be immensely useful to create better versions of ourselves, or version of ourselves that are just better attuned to who we are, to who we want to be, and maybe also to the planet around us. And there is a huge amount of potential with AI in that respect. But to do it right, we need to really reflect maybe first on who do we want to be with it. So I can give many examples, right? But maybe to make one that is probably also speak to something of utility for society. We are an information society. We thrive on information. Information imbalance is or inequality. I think it's going to be even more of a problem in the future than it is today. If you don't have the ability to access information due to, your upbringing, your physical condition, whatever to happen in your life, you are by definition excluded in society. We have now the capability to avoid that, or to make society really inclusive for everybody. What's missing perhaps is the impulse to go in that direction, right? To create accessibility technology that can allow really everybody to be informed when it comes to voting, or to understand what's going on in this very complex world. And yeah, I think that's an incredible potential that we are just scratching the surface of, and we could do much more.
Mm-hmm. That does indeed sound like a type of problem that designers are very well equipped to try to solve, the translation of from the science domain into the more real world domain. And yeah, I think that's a very noble call to action. Anything to add?
Well, and I agree with what you were just saying about the translation to a kind of everyday life, and stepping away from the kind of the imagined future-oriented visions of AI, and looking at AI today, or actually existing AI, and what it's actually doing in the world today, and how that may be shaped towards better ends. So that's again, that's what I find exciting about this work, and I hope more designers kind of get their hands dirty and step into that field.
I see. We have too much agreement amongst our panels on this topic of good human-centered design of AI. I think, yes, coming from this approach that what the human experience of what is good and what is meaningful should be a crucial ingredient into this thing. I guess, does anybody want to kind of counter that point, or do you have any contrarian opinions on this that might be worth noting?
Well, I think below the surface, we do disagree about some things. For example, coming back to the politics question and whether or not, so in my view, to your point about voting, people have competing material interests, and that will always be the case, or at least under our current system. And so that's just something that we kind of have to kind of live with and negotiate that space. And I think it's a wrong impulse to say, well, this is a problem of values or knowledge or whatever. And kind of not account for the fact that there are real kind of material interests at stake that might be, competing. And similarly, in the AI field, I think it's very easy for us to kind of paper over those differences and say, oh, we basically all want the same thing, because then as designers we're really just useful idiots, So I think leaning into that kind of discomfort of acknowledging that we don't all want the same thing, and that's something that we kind of have to actively grapple with is super important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah. Well, no, definitely. I mean, you were asking for things that we are less rosy or pink glassy, if you want. I'm, for instance, very concerned about the normative power that AI technology has, because it tends to somehow average human experience and to average, the way that we behave. I think I told these anecdotes basically to everyone. My first experience when I used TikTok, I was flabbergasted by how bad it was for my own well-being when I tried. Nothing to say about that. It's a fantastic app. So I just don't like it. But the AI is a technology designed to create something that is pretty much the same for everybody. But but it is designed like this right now due to this focus on effectiveness and on profit too. I think we need to break away from that. We are in somehow, but we are not understanding what's the consequences of that. So, for instance, the whole idea of personalization of content consumption, right, which was a fantastic idea, turned out to be a very bad idea, or at least the implementation of it was very bad, because it's exacerbating every division that we have. So this maybe goes back into why we need the design here, right? Because we needed to trade off the respect for the individual and the uniqueness of the individual, which I think it is at the basis of many design practices, and trade it with the potential of a technology that can reach the masses, but without insisting, without hinging on the wrong aspect of like dealing with big populations.
Yeah.
So the normative power really concerns me, and I think this is where we should intervene.
Yes. One of the points that you also brought up that I'm picking up on is that, like, you didn't like TikTok, so you choose not to do it. And it seems to be that for most people, the only option, if they don't like an AI system that is being deployed, is to kind of opt out from being part of the whole experience or the system. So I think, yes, this is another reason why we need better design AI systems, because then you won't have a portion of the population just check out and not be involved with its development, or even want just straight up technophobic hatred for these kind of systems, which we don't want, because we want all of us to be in this together so that we can design things that are good for everybody. We have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions if we have. Fantastic. I'm not a fast reader. I think we've covered most of this stuff that I can think of. I mean, it seems like a lot of the questions are interested about the existing trends or opportunities or mega trends. And I guess just, do you have any insights about what's happening in the state of the art right now, and where are opportunities that people should look at, and where are, false gold that you should just kind of ignore, this is a passing fad?
I'll give a very kind of down-to-earth answer, which isn't very kind of whiz-bang. But what I see currently with the adoption of these technologies in local government, for example, one thing that I find interesting is that it's being insourced again. So where before it was all kind of just bought on the market and was out of democratic control, there's at least an acknowledgement that needs to kind of be brought back into the sphere of influence of all of us. But to then do that effectively with very limited resources, right, which is very different from where this stuff came from, at least the neural network and machine learning stuff, with practically speaking unlimited resources is kind of requires different, in a technical sense also different development environments, different practices, different processes, and those are slowly emerging. And I think that's really interesting if we can get to a point where small teams, people with limited resources, can leverage these technologies towards their own ends and are not dependent on the large infrastructure of large tech corporations. That's I think a very interesting trend to follow through, and it's something that we as designers can also contribute to. It might sound very technical, but these are also the tools that people use to build things for themselves or for each other, right? So I think there's a lot we can contribute there.
Am I right in understanding you're emphasizing the difference from like being a scientist to technicians to practitioners? So the kind of from, or no?
There's no clear distinction to me.
Okay.
You're talking to a practice-based researcher. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
But if I can latch on
Yes.
onto that, because we are seeing a shift. So I'm fascinated by how these recent technologies like GPT-3, for instance, and DALL-E could really democratize access to very advanced application of AI, right? Because prompt-based tools allow you to create classes. I mean, everything that will require, some technical skill just can be done through a natural language, which is fascinating. But then again, it's in control of a few companies. But something that has happened recently, which is very interesting, is with Stable Diffusion. So everybody knows DALL-E as a tool to generate very evocative and fascinating images, right? That's owned by OpenAI. Very nice story about it in of itself. And a group of researchers created a version of that and just released it to the public. Anybody, we could, with a few $100 and a couple of lines of code, just run it by ourselves. So I think there is a clear push happening to re-democratize this particular type of resources that is really countering this, a recentering of the resources that. So that I think it's a very interesting one. It's very recent. I'm very curious to see where we're going next.
My fear is that decentralized systems often somehow end up being centralizing again, like what we see with blockchains and all that. But yes, the hope is that
different
this
podcast.
will be, yes, of course. But the hope is that this complex system will remain in the hands of everybody. I can't think. So there's other asking you to talk about maybe other examples of good AI case studies. Do you want to share any examples? And we'll wrap up on that. In that case, then, can I ask you to give the camera and the audience a call to action? I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of aspiring designers and aspiring AI designers in listening. So maybe you could even invite them to come join your program. So tell them why they should join you in your practice.
Oh, wow. Why? Because it's fun and interesting and challenging and important. And it's in this particular case, it's a technology where a lot of things that matter to all of us kind of converge. So that is what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, and I build on that, and I think there are so many different ways of being in this space that nobody should be afraid of not fitting. So there is something for everybody, and a lot of fun indeed, I think.
I'm going to borrow from one of our colleagues, Connie Bakker. She's a professor in sustainability. She wrote a call for action as design as if your life depends on it. Which it might seem a little bit exaggerated when it comes to AI, right? Because there are bigger problems perhaps. But I do believe that that's the right call for action also in this particular field. So society needs you, right? Student practitioners to engage with this. It is becoming less and less of a niche and very technical topic. It is possible to engage with it. So just join us. And we're going to have also fun on the way, yes.
Great. There you go. You've heard it. Just join us. You're needed. Your skills and your mindset and everything about that you bring is desired in this field. So just join us on this fun journey. Can we get a round of applause for the panelists? And thanks everybody for joining.
you.